Her name was Tierra. Tierra, oh how lovely she had been in those early days. I recall not where I first met her, the place is not of importance, but I know what she looked like she always used to look, so lovely that the awakened eye thought itself in a dream. She sat on a train once, back when she was still a stranger to my person, yet never a stranger to my soul. She had sat on that train, smiling, not at me, not at a lovely thought, but at every face passing her by, as if she would see in any stranger a friend. And thus she was, of course, beautiful. Yet her loveliness, her beauty was not so much in the lines of her face or in the color of her dress, not even in her hair that was also so often admired. Her beauty, it seemed to me, sprung utterly and solely from her smile. Oh, what a smile it was, indeed! She followed never the common habit of parting her lips. She rather kept them closed and, merely unnoticed, they glided by themselves into that joyful position. It seemed a means so natural, so gentle, that neither an observer nor she herself could find it in any way tiresome. It was a decent smile, very humble, not proud, but very charming. She seemed as if she was born to smile, as if her cheeks knew nothing else to do, as if every day she had ever lived was full of sunshine, as if no shadow had ever fallen upon her soul. Yet aside from her smile, from her appearance, which always blended in very humbly into her surroundings, and was thus in its piousness the most marveled of all, Tierra had also a character that thought its equal in all other women. No, not only in women, in humankind. Most women, I'm afraid, are little more than of beauty, and most men are even falling short in that. But Tierra, oh Tierra, what impeccable soul rested in that body! When she moved very cautiously. When she looked, it was never importuning, and when she spoke, her angel voice said never a word of harm or deception. I think Tierra could have seen herself in a mirror, and might not have recognized herself, so little aware was she of her beauty, so careful in its judgment was her mind. With this marvelous person I became acquainted. I could not become not acquainted with her, it was merely impossible. I walked with her through beautiful gardens and along lovely streets. Tierra liked to walk, and she liked to look, and most of all she liked to smile. Who could not also smile with such a person by his side, whose heart could not be merry in her presence? Who could possibly behold her smile and not fall in love immediately? I could not. Afterwards, I dreamt 1,000 fancies before I dared to come forward myself. I imagined a myriad of blissful moments, sitting under a shady tree, talking to her at length, looking at her face when the wind went through her hair, stroking her rosy cheeks with a fingertip, sealing her smile with a kiss. All this I fancied when I was not in the presence of Tierra, yet when I was with her, I was never absent in mind, never was my heart pounding wildly, never grew my hands slippery of sweat. When I was with Tierra, my heart was at ease, my mind fully absorbed by her presence, and all I wanted was to see her smile, and she smiled day after day. When time passed by and my acquaintance with her became closer, my relations to her much stronger, and my name was more commonly heard in her presence, I thought to approach a dream. Like a sleeper in sweet slumber at night time, I glided over gradually, nearly unnoticed. My dreams became all of a sudden so likely that reality itself seemed like a dream. And ere I awoke from that dream, I found Tierra at my side, and I not dreaming at all. Dreamlike were these years that followed, and pleasant were those dreams. To be wed to a person like Tierra gave meaning to my life. I abandoned all thoughts of darkness and wickedness in the pure sensation of Tierra. And as a wife, as it happened so rarely, she became even more beautiful to me. We lived at each other's side from daydream to daydream, being equal in duty and bliss. But at the side of Tierra, such a thing as duty never existed to me, and as bliss I would never have taken anything but the company of her. All these numerous evils that provide reason for unhappiness so commonly, I saw not. But after a few years, oh, how lovely they were in remembrance. They seem now the only years of my life worth living. I noticed a change, a horrible change in the facial lines of Tierra. Her smile brought slowly forward the countenance of pain. Sometimes tears in her eyes were not of joy, and more commonly I noticed a sigh flavored by sorrow. She used to sleep longer at daytimes, went to bed more early. At least she could deny it no longer, and I called for the aid of a physician. But the honorable man, he knew little to do, and Tierra took him the promise to keep his findings from me. But I could not deny her state. I could not turn a blind eye at her rapidly declining health. One day, she was unable to walk through the gardens. Another, she could not leave her bed. And lastly, oh Melody, Tierra died. With her passing, I thought to evaporate, to be consumed in the moment of grief. Indeed, I am certain I would not have lived long after the ascent of Tierra, were it not, yes, were it not for a peculiar flame that kept burning in my heart. I was determined, I must admit, to give my life over at last. Yet as I stood at the margin and decided to leap into the abyss, I saw a face and a smile, and the wind whispered to me consoling words. from Tierra. I turned away from that frightful thought. Afterwards, whenever I took a careless step towards danger, a hand seemed to lead me in a safer direction. Whenever I was about to commit a folly in rage, a balm of memories calmed my heart. Whenever I sat in deep agony over a volume that tormented my soul, an air came from the window and turned it to a happier page. Whenever I lay to rest in the empty marriage bed and wondered whether to rise in the morrow, I felt a companion beside me and the low weight of a head resting on my bosom. So it was, and only in this way, that I lived so many years longer. Yet my days, despite this consolation, were lonely and full of sorrow. Any time seemed an agony that followed after a time spent with Tierra. I was unable to forget her and unwilling to let her go. I hung on to memories and daydreams, to fancies of times that had been. But with every day I seemed to awake from that slumber, and like a waking sleeper, that dream, my time with Tierra, became unlikely, even absurd to me. I could not imagine any longer that I had lived through such bliss. In disbelief, I looked at the little remains I had from her. In wonder, I shook my head at memories. Lastly, I awoke from that dream, yet only to fall into a dream much darker. The event itself, and little more than an event it was, bids defiance to all explanations. Maybe it was my heart, so deeply hurt that it would love anything that was able to love it back. Or maybe it was my mind, seeking renewal of that blissful time. Maybe it was my deep consumption in loneliness and the disenchantment after awaking from that dream with Tierra. But I became acquainted with a person named Dwana, and, in short, I married her. Words fail me in the explanation of the deep terror that befell me when I became aware of the events that had rushed over me. Dwana was a person completely unbearable and a stinging pain to my sensitive eyes. I thought to avoid her face by any means, yet not because of any hideousness there, but because of the frown it always bore. She seemed distemperate, ill-tempered, bewildered at all times. Not once I had seen her smile, not once before and not once after our wedding. She always wore a look of annoyance. I don't think she had a face under that mask of frigidness. When she spoke, she talked in platitudes. When she looked, she judged before her eyes met the object in question, and when she listened, she formed an opinion before the last word was said. She went to bed early for a lack of perspective, and slept in long for the same reason. She refused to walk, to leave the house, to have guests, and complained after all about loneliness. Out of ignorance, she avoided reading, and for a lack of fantasy, she preferred not to dream. Such a dreadful person was Dwana. Still, I became used to her, like a dog becomes used to a bed of fleas. I longed to avoid her with mixed success, split company in table and bed. But what disturbed me more, what disturbed me most upon all, was another change in my life. The moment Dwana came into being, all my company, my consolation was gone. The nightly bed felt cold and empty. My soul felt confronted with the desert of eternity lying before it. And lastly, the abyss became again so tempting to me. was there to save me this time. Only a heavy dose of opium. To this I had fallen and spent many fruitless hours in smoke-clouded rooms, dulling myself into deep deliriums, into long-forgotten fantasies of merrier days. From time to time, a wild mania befell me, and I thought in my obsessive state to see the lines of Tierra in the face of my wife. My wife! I shudder by that word. These were hours of mad excitement, not to be mistaken for passion or even pleasure. I felt deep inner horror in the carrying out of these wildest moments, yet at the peak of delirium I knew not how to avoid it. Immediately afterwards, the absurdity of my actions struck fully upon me. I pushed her from me and gave myself into lonely and wild rage for many hours in the mad enclosure of my chamber. I was in such a state when I nearly lost my senses over the tormenting company of Duana, the painful memories of my lost angel, and the heavy and ever-increasing doses of opium, which allowed me only to bear that state somewhat longer. Yet even in that delirium I could not miss some of the changes that were happening around me. Duana, that person, began to wander around at night. She seemed sleepless and grew pale and numb from exhaustion. In a dark moment I dared to ask her for the reason behind the sudden change of habit. She spoke to me on this one night at length for many hours, longer than ever before, and were it not for the opiate in my veins, I would have not stood to listen. She spoke of a growing deprivation of sleep, of rest she could not longer find. Even more terrible, she told me of sudden wakeful moments at night, when she was not able to move a limb, and deep terror struck over her. She spoke of a fear, a sincere yet absurd fear, of suffocating in sleep. She talked herself into a pit of madness. She insisted that she had been choked during the previous nights. She showed me red marks on her neck, blamed first a servant, then me. I diagnosed the marks as blisters, her paralysis as an unwelcome but common paralysis in sleep, her fear of suffocating as a nervous symptom of mind. I advised her, why did I even advise her, to ask for the aid of a physician. She instead pled for an absurd thing, my company. Who was I to ease her deprivation? What was I to do about her paralysis? I denied that proposal and called for a physician on the day that followed. He advised a medical treatment, some opiate similar to my own, a special composite made to slumber at ease. Yet she denied it. I said she denied it. That was what she made of my help. Thereafter, of course, her state turned for the worse. Her hair grew thin, her skin grew pale, frequent moments of hysteria occurred. To all this, she proved unable to sleep and wandered along the hallways for many hours at night. In some nights, I heard her footsteps occasionally, her breath close to my door. There she would stand for hours, tormenting my sleep by her presence. I increased the dose of the opiate and found sleep despite her wicked atrocity. The illness of Duana reached its final state. She became afraid of mirrored surfaces, I noticed. In her rooms she had all mirrors removed. In mine, where she remained rarely, she hid it behind a screen. She told me at one late hour, when I was unable to fend her off, about this terror she felt of the mirrors. She showed me the marks on her neck. They had turned red like a bruise. Repeatedly, she told me of night terrors, of a heavy pressure on her chest that made her unable to breathe. She told me distinctively of a presence she felt, of an evil that haunted her, an evil she saw in the mirrors. I call it fancy, madness, an illusion of mind, a sickness, an illness, a wickedness of her. I increased the dose of my treatment this night further than ever before. With that dose awoke my mania. I came over her in a wild madness, fancying her the lost beauty of Tierra.
Tierra! Tierra!
I called her, and for one night only, I believed it more than I ever had. In this illusion, she seemed to find comfort, and once only, I thought to see the shadow of a smile on her face. The day after my mania had erupted so wildly, I lay for long hours in bed. I dreamt again of the past, of the years I had spent with Tierra. As I followed such a dream, I felt something on my chest. A low pressure, not threatening, but terrifyingly comforting. The marriage bed, it seemed no longer so empty, not so broad its build, not so voluptuous its sheets. I arose and crossed the room. I came to a halt and drew the screen from the mirror before me. The moment I looked in that mirror, my heart dropped a beat. Beside me I saw the clear vision of a face I had not seen for long. That vision was smiling at me, yet what a smile! Like a knife it cut deeply into her cheeks. Her lips parted and disclosed 2 rows of bared teeth. From these fangs, that smile seemed to come over me. Yet from the hands of Tierra, and only she could be that vision, I noticed in terror blood dripping on the floor. A moment later, a servant burst into my room and told me in horror that Lady Dwarna had died. She had suffocated last night in sleep.